Faubourg Brewery operators are downsizing the volume of beer made at its New Orleans East facility.
And as Maddie Kurth reports, the business decision is expected to cost some New Orleans workers their jobs.
The oldest operating neighborhood brewery in New Orleans is scaling back.
It's really just a change up of our production footprint and where things are being made.
Last year, the Benson Group's Faubourg Brewing Company merged with Made by the Water. That's a craft brewing company with a presence in 8 states across the Southeast. The plan was to become one of the largest craft beer makers in the country by producing well over 100,000 barrels per year at the New Orleans East site. Made by the Water CEO Alexis Sekmaka says things are changing, but Louisiana beer will still be made in Louisiana.
Faubourg is going to continue to be producing beer in New Orleans. The tap room is going to remain open. The event space is going to remain open. And the variety of small batch products that have always been on tap and available in New Orleans East is going to continue to be readily available and welcoming guests in there.
With the consolidation comes changes in the brewery's workforce.
So does that come with the loss of jobs?
Unfortunately, it does, yes.
Do you know about how many?
So I'd prefer not to comment on all that.
We don't want anyone to lose a job. Look, New Orleans East deserves a lot more business attention. They deserve a lot more investment, and we've been saying that for quite some time.
New Orleans Councilman Oliver Thomas says he has facilitated numerous conversations between Made by the Water and the city, working to find common ground to keep the business in the city. He says those conversations will continue in hopes of restoring laid-off employees to the workforce.
And don't forget, those discussions actually got Made by the Water to consolidate their business here rather than stay in North Carolina. So just think if they had not moved their operation here, or if they were moving their entire operation, it would be more than a few people losing their jobs. It would lose an entire business interest.
Now, in addition to the Faubourg brand beers, Sekmaka says the tap room on Jordan Drive will continue to feature 10 to 20 rotating brews. They just aren't guaranteed to be made on site.